On today's show, the Indiana Pacers had their storybook ending cut a little short as they fall to the Los Angeles Lakers in the title game of the NBA's inaugural in-season tournament. How they looked throughout the tournament and what this experience means to a young Indiana Pacers team, as well as Tyrese Haliburton being put on a large-scale stage in front of a national audience on his superstar ascendancy towards the top of the NBA. It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is so simple to play. You can make your picks and submit an entry in less than 60 seconds. They've got quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types, which is what makes PrizePicks the #1 DFS app on the market. And with basketball season in full swing, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, you can do LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus reception. So if you've been thinking about getting into daily fantasy sports, you've got to give PrizePicks a chance. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA with promo code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Pacers, Tony East. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcast and on YouTube. Just search Locked On Pacers. Tony, you were there in Las Vegas, live and in person for the first ever, the inaugural NBA in-season tournament. So we're going to get into what the experience was like specifically for this Indiana Pacers team. But I want to know what your experience was like. What was it like just being there and soaking it all in?
It was very cool. First ever event that the NBA has ever had, and I'm certain now after being there it will not be the last. It was very spectacular, both because it was Las Vegas and because it was a big event. And I think everybody knows this, but I think the NBA is pretty happy that the Lakers were there. That added to the number of fans and the popularity of it. But that's a good thing, right? That's not a bad thing at all. And it was a lot of marquee reporters. Adam Silver spoke to the media. Lots of events going on for the players, for the fans. It was a really big deal. And the fact that the games were awesome and high intensity and, very much marquee and looked forward to, I think says a lot about it. It was really fun to be there and be a part of it. And the Pacers, of course, the darlings of the world for a week here.
Yeah, I mean, look, they were on a bit of a kind of a little Cinderella run, whatever you want to call it. They beat the Celtics. It looked like, Tyrese Haliburton and Obi Toppin both questionable for that game. They get in, they play, beat the Celtics, then they beat the Bucks, and then they're there in the tournament, the final game against the Lakers, and they fell a little bit short. Their storybook ending coming to a bit of an early close. It felt like the Lakers were really able to kind of make things tough for the Pacers offensively there in the title game. They kind of had like this 8 to 11 point lead like the entire time. What was the biggest reason that Indy couldn't pull off the win against LA there?
Yeah, it never felt like, even when the Pacers had it at 5 or 6, it never felt like they had a chance because they could never truly go on a run. It was always just 1 or 2 baskets, and then the Lakers had an answer. And so even when the Pacers got it to 3 in the fourth quarter, Cam Reddish scores twice, game's over. Pacers never got within 1 possession again. To me, it was all about the size. A problem the Pacers have had all season against some teams is like LeBron James is going to be good against everybody, right? Anthony Davis usually, right, he is sort of a roller coaster, but is going to be good against everybody. I had no doubt in a game like that on ESPN, big stage, that they were going to be good and be hard for the Pacers. You kind of bake that in. But guys like Cam Reddish and guys like Taurean Prince and guys like Rui Hachimura, Rui didn't play that much, but like they typically do more damage against the Pacers than other types of teams just because the Pacers are pretty small, right? When Obi Toppin comes out, their 4 is Aaron Nesmith or Ben Mathurin or, Buddy Hield was guarding LeBron at times. Like that is just the size the Pacers have to live with. And so for years they've talked about like the stars do well against everybody. but your, Harrison Barnes level wings, for example, not to pick on Harrison Barnes, but that tier of players tends to go above their expectation in games against the Pacers because they have an easier matchup or a smaller opponent. And the Lakers are huge everywhere, and their size on offense helped. And on defense, they could throw length at Tyrese Haliburton. He still had a nice game, but not nearly up to the high profile outings he had been having leading up to that game. So to me, the story of the basketball game itself was the Lakers' size was just something the Pacers didn't have answers for. It's a problem they've had for forever, and something they'll certainly have to address if they want to continue their ascent that they started this week.
How important just overall, though, was this experience for this Pacers team, right? Third youngest team in the NBA, being there, national TV, high stakes, all of it.
Massive. I mean, you nailed it. Like, it's really interesting because they're playing well this year. They've beaten a ton of good teams that people think of them as like becoming established, but over half their rotation in that championship game is on a rookie scale contract right now. And that doesn't even account for, Andrew Nembhard didn't play. He's in his second year. Their lottery pick, Jarris Walker, from this season, got in with like a minute left. Like, they are still young, and their GM, Chad Buchanan, said before the season, they're thinking long-term. So that was what this was all about for them. Experience, right? Like, to get a meaningful playoff type atmosphere experience for a team that, like, Tyrese Haliburton's never been in a postseason game. Buddy Hield's never been in a postseason game. He's 31. A lot of those rookie scale guys haven't made it far, Aaron Nesmith being the exception, and Bruce Brown obviously won a championship last year. So that was, I think, the biggest thing they gained from this, besides obviously some confidence that they can really hang with or beat anybody. They got a ton of meaningful, nerves before a game, jitters, ESPN. Oh my gosh, Mike Breen is on the call. Doris Burke's right there, right? Like, that is a big deal to these players, and you have to learn how to overcome those, what it takes to play with those emotions, what it takes to walk out there and go, oh, we're playing LeBron on a big stage, right? Like, that's going to matter for them. And maybe that doesn't manifest right away, but all of a sudden they have, 7 games of meaningful playoff experience instead of, whatever it would be at the end of this season. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing they gain from this, beyond, of course, the fact that the quarterfinals and semifinals were regular season games that they did in fact win in the standings.
It's so weird that, like, wait, now we have yet another NBA game that just like exists in limbo somewhere, where, like, you had Lakers fans, Pacer fans, like, scanning like the score, the standing list, like, why didn't we pick up a dub, like, or an L, like, what happened in the standings? And
it's just really funny about that. Exist. Like, they go back to reality so fast. Dustin Dopirak, the Pacers beat writer for the Indy Star, nailed this. Like, what a reality shift for the Pacers that Tyrese Haliburton daps up Flava Flav on the floor after the game and then flies on a flight to go play the Pistons in Detroit on Monday. Like, what a change in 40 hours that emotional roller coaster has to be from this tournament.
It's almost like the NBA in-season tournament is just like a little fever dream that happens in the middle part of the season. You gotta come back down to reality. I want to ask you about Haliburton here in a second, because it's everything for this Pacers team. But yeah. I do have to know, just in your eyes, in your assessment, who was the Pacers' second best player throughout this kind of tournament run?
Miles Turner typically was, the Thursday game against the Bucks, 26-10 against a big Bucks team. He was significant in that game. He is their size. Like I said earlier, they don't have a lot of it. So he is almost always the answer, right? His defensive levels kind of dropped the last 2 seasons, but his offensive levels risen way more than that drop. He has almost always been their second most important player. He's got an inside-out game now. He's way more confident. He knows who he is. And for the first time since he was like a sophomore in the league, he's not in trade rumors somehow. It feels weird to say that talking about him, but that matters, right? Like, that clear mental headspace, focus on your game. This is probably the longest run of his career. Hasn't been injured, has been really significant for him. And part of the both strength and weakness of the Pacers is that who the next best guy is going to be on a given night could be anybody. Sometimes that's bad because it's nobody. But sometimes, Aaron Nesmith was great in the finals, right? He has had up and down games. Obi Toppin has improved as a shooter this season. Sometimes it's been him. Sometimes it's been Ben Mathurin, who had 20 points in that title game as well. TJ McConnell was a darling of the tournament, right? Like, any number of guys can step up. And part of my running theory for the Pacers is if Haliburton plus one other guy has a really good game, they have a great chance of winning, but they don't always get it. And that's, part of being a young team is they don't have that second guy yet, but they're figuring it out. Most often it's Miles Turner, but sometimes, as people saw in this tournament, it can be somebody else.
Plus, Miles Turner loves Legos, and who doesn't love Legos? So that's a ringing right. endorsement for him.
He does not play with Legos, Jackson. He builds them.
He builds Legos. That's an important distinction to make there. Look, when it comes to Tyrese Haliburton, man, he was just absolutely sensational, playing on another level.
Yep.
I think he is clear cut, like all NBA first team caliber this season. I think there's a strong argument that he should be in the MVP consideration at this point with as good as the Pacers are playing, how their high octane offense. It all starts and stops with him. So just, I mean, when do we stop pretending that this Haliburton Sabonis trade was a win-win trade for both sides? That's my first question here for you, Tony, because like you look at the ascendancy, the upward trajectory that Haliburton is on. He is clearly a superstar level player right now.
Yeah, he's 23 and he's one of the best. Pick your number, 8, 10, 13, whatever you want to cut it off at, players in the league right now, right? Like his stats are ridiculous, and some teams with size have figured out how to slow him, Orlando and LA, but he'll figure it out. He's adjusted to everybody. Yeah, I saw this, like, I hate rehashing trades years later. I saw this when the Kings made the trade. It was like, if the Sacramento Kings are a farmer, they traded a Ferrari for a tractor. The tractor is way more important to the farmer, but like most people would be like, yeah, the Ferrari, I want that. So I thought that was a really good way of describing what this was.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I thought that was perfect. That was forever ago. I think it was a Kings fan actually who put that out. I thought that was brilliant and a good way of putting it. The Pacers are certainly very happy that they made the trade. That's what I will say in response to that. I mean, yeah, like Kevin Garnett's tweeting twice during the season, like, yeah, dude, put this guy in the MVP conversation. His stats are ridiculous, and he very rarely has an off night. I think that's kind of the mark of a star, is it's an every night thing.
Yeah, he's the consistency is there, and that's what made it kind of stood out so much in the title game, right? Is the Lakers were able to kind of contain him a little bit. It looked like they really did find a way to slow him down, and hopefully that's something that he can look at and study and learn from, and be able to kind of counteract moving forward. Teams with length that were they're basically blitzing him all night, right? Like daring the Pacers to beat them 4-on-3 in the half court.
It's really interesting because he's such a natural distributor, to his credit. It's such a big strength of his that he can pass like crazy and never turn it over. But there's a lot of games and times where the Pacers' best offense is like, Tyrese Haliburton, just go look for your shot, shoot, score, right? And the Lakers, because they're huge and have length, can really make it hard for him to find those shots and look for that space, which credit to them for that. But it's such like an unnatural instinct for him to be like, yeah, I'm the guy. I have to score.
First, right? Yeah.
And I think he's only 23. He'll figure it out. But, that you see that in games like the Lakers game, where it took really till the middle of the third quarter for him to realize where the driving lanes were. They were moving their pick and roll more to the side so he could have more space. And it worked a little bit, but not completely. He had 20 and 11, and I'm like growing the guy. But, it was slower. It took longer, and he will figure it out. But it's very interesting that, usually you think of stars as like they're such good scorers, they can change a game because they can put the ball in the bucket. Like for him, it's really dialing in and making sure he knows he's the right level of aggression, and he'll figure it out. He always does. But you saw in that game what his thinking can be sometimes.
That's the real mark of a star. Is you could put up 2011 and you're still going to get grilled because the expectations are now monumental for what you can actually produce. How much better can Tyrese Haliburton get on his superstar climb? What lessons can the Pacers ultimately learn from their in-season tournament experience? You're going to have us covered for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Pacers. Tony, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Thanks for having me, Jackson.